how can the Israeli government, how can the world help the Palestinian people flourish? So you suggested allowing reputable aid organizations in, but that's kind of almost patching,
Yeah.
just helping humans who are suffering. But that's not how you have a nation flourish. You have to build up the infrastructure. You have to build up a culture of the education system, the democratic processes of electing and regular elections, and so that the people are represented. And you have to form partnerships, friendships, normalization of relations with the Arab world, with Israel. You can travel back and forth, and lessen the chokehold, like the security chokehold,
Yeah.
that you could say is justified in a militaristic situation. But why is it a military situation? The question is there, like, where do we go from here? If we'll talk about Netanyahu some more. He is he's very criticized inside Israel as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe less so after October 7th, because again, in the same way you can empathize with the Palestinian people, you can empathize with Israelis, where October 7th touched, just like it did for Americans with 9/11, it touched some kind of primal thing
100%.
of fear, of like,
oh yeah, and like
holy shit.
the same thing I said before, like I could also very easily go, if one of my kids was like at that rave or something like that and just got gunned down or kidnapped I could understand being like, level the whole goddamn place, and I'm sure I would feel that way if that was one of my kids, so yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, there's lots of examples in the world of like France and Germany are right next to each other, and Ireland and England are right next to each other, and they're just totally living in harmony right now. Like, there is just the thought of them going to war is like inconceivable right now. Not saying it could never happen in the future, but it seems pretty hard to imagine. And that being the case would have been very hard to imagine for a very long time. Like there's some serious levels of brutality between those two societies, and even more directly involved. Egypt and Israel went to war 4 times in a couple decades. They went to war, and then in the late 70s they made a land for peace deal, and they haven't been to war since. And like, I do at least try to hold out that, like, that is, it's not like Egypt you're not going to say they don't have an issue with radical Islam in Egypt. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the answer. It's just that they made a land for peace deal. And once that wasn't that was solved, it was kind of easier to avoid the war. And I do like to think that there could be a solution to the Israel-Palestine question, but it's going to have to involve Israel taking their boot off of the Palestinians' neck. And I know that that's scary. And I understand that there are like legitimate concerns about that. There's was the great Thomas Jefferson quote about slavery, which was we have the wolf by the tail, and we can neither afford to hold on to him nor risk letting him go. Which is like, you could see where that would have been like a real concern of people, like right toward the end of slavery, or whatever, in the early 1800s, say the first half of the 19th century, where you'd be like, okay, we recognize this is wrong now, but we've had these millions of people enslaved for all these years. If we let them go, they're going to fucking kill us. And what are you saying? They're citizens now, meaning the Second Amendment applies to them, meaning that the guy who I enslaved now can get a gun? You know what's, and so, okay, there are but I think in hindsight, looking back at it, we would all just go, yeah, but you can't enslave people. So like, whatever risks come with the next phase of this, unfortunately, like, you're going to have to just deal with that and move. You have to start with abolishing slavery.
And it is good to also remember, in the hopeful message you send, like, at any day you can make a deal. That's one of the frustrating things I had with I hosted a debate on Israel. It's like, it just felt hopeless. And a lot of people I talked to, it feels hopeless. But like, I have a lot of I maybe naively see a lot of possibilities of peace there. I see, for example, normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel, and then Saudi Arabia taking some ownership over Gaza, something like that. Some interesting, uh, where a big major player in that region takes ownership and steps as the middleman.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you're 100% right that, and even before October 7th, I think many steps had been taken away from, the peace process and the feeling of that. I mean, really, I think since the second Intifada, is when like the appetite for peace, I think in Israel was greatly diminished. There, but to your point, I mean, it's gonna take really painful concessions on all sides in order to get there. And I think that the personally, I think, and I don't know if I say this for the not necessarily like the Arab world, um, but at least the nation states, like their governments, I think are pretty much there. Like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Jordan and Egypt. Like if the Israelis, they're almost like, look, these are American sock puppets, for the most part, right? And so their thing is that like, okay, 100% of my population is completely opposed to what Israel's doing to Palestine right now. And they just hate that that the nation was created at all, that all the Arabs were kicked out of what is, very important land to them religiously. And so the governments there are like, look, we want to continue to have US tax dollars flooding in here. We'd love to make a deal with Israel, but like you gotta stop doing this to the Palestinians so my own people don't rise up against me. So I think as long if the Israelis were like, fine, we'll do a two-state solution or something like that, I think Saudi Arabia couldn't wait to broker. In fact, they proposed a two-state solution just a few years ago. I mean, they would love to be a part of that and normalize relations. Amongst the Palestinians, like, which again, I think this had been accepted multiple times, at least by their leadership. It's like, yeah, you're gonna have to accept that like you lost in 48. You're gonna have to accept that you lost in 47. You're gonna have to accept that the state of Israel does exist. And you're gonna have to accept that like the right of return is not going to literally mean that everybody can go back to where they were. And what Israel's gonna have to concede is that it was awfully fucked up that they kicked a lot of people out of their land, and that the whole a land for a people without land was never true. That was just a slogan that felt good to avoid what you guys actually did. And the fact that it was inexcusable that you guys occupied these people for 60 years, and that has to end immediately.